All right, welcome back to Seattle Sports Secrets. I'm Ryan Hanna, and today is a very special episode because we have a guest from Seattle Sports Twitter, Gabe Dang. You can find him on Twitter at csports99. Gabe, how you doing, my man?
I am doing excellent. Just got out of class, but I'm ready to do it. Let's go.
All right, so the last time we got off, it was a little about a week ago, kind of right around the NHL trade deadline. And as we all know, it was a very busy week for Ron Francis and the Seattle Kraken. So a lot of trades, a lot of guys leaving as anticipated. Gabe, I'm curious what your impressions were of this deadline.
Yeah, so I mean, to some extent, we all knew it was going to happen, right? The whole clearinghouse thing. We knew Giordano was going to go. Other than that, it was kind of up in the air on who was going to leave. But I mean, for the most part, I was pretty okay with everything. There were like three-ish players that I didn't want to see go. I was kind of upset about Calle Yarncroke. I was upset about Marcus Johansson. And then Colin Blackwell, I didn't think we needed to get rid of him either. But apart from that, I think for the most part we got good value out of all those trades, but still, you don't want to see people go. And I thought a lot of those guys just didn't need to.
Right. And you bring up a good point, like with the value and stuff. Is if I go back, I've got each of the trades pulled up here. Yarncroke alone got a second round pick this year that came from Florida, a third round pick next year, and a seventh round pick in 2024. And looking at some of the other picks that they got, like for Giordano and Blackwell, Lauzon. For me, it's kind of tough so far between this and the expansion draft. I've had a hard time pegging Francis's, I guess, ability to get maximize value. Just because it's been so inconsistent. Is that something you agree with, or have you seen more
Yeah, definitely.
something else?
Because I mean, when people look at the Giordano trade, for example, I mean, I don't remember exactly what it was we got in return, but
I believe it was
the
like
general,
two
yeah,
seconds or something like that.
yeah, and then there was something else topped on top of it, like a fourth in a later year or something like that. But regardless, the general consensus was that, we could have done better for that because there were other defensemen being moved and we still didn't even end up getting a first rounder for him, which is what pretty much everyone expected at that point. And then on top of that, you're talking about the inconsistency. Then he flips Jeremy Lauzon, who I think everyone can pretty much agree was our most, we'll say, streaky defender.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
and you flip him for a second to Nashville. So, I was happy about that one, but
I
like you
don't
said,
think
it
there
was
was a sane
inconsistent.
person that wasn't happy about that one.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, it was pretty up and down, but I think overall it was good.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, he does seem very inconsistent with his trades because it seems like one moment he'll look like amazing with the Yarncroke trade. I think that was a good return. And keep in mind, this is my very basic knowledge of
Yeah.
hockey. But for the Yarncroke return, I think that was good. Lauzon, I think, was highway robbery of the Preds. But then you have things like the Giordano trade, which I was like, we could have gotten way more than that, especially when you add Blackwell into that, I think.
Right. And that's why I didn't like that trade very much because Colin Blackwell was starting to play probably his best hockey of the year. He was doing crazy stuff on the penalty kill with Yanni Gordon. They were starting to like really figure something out, playing with a lot of energy. And then you kind of just like it seemed like they almost just like threw him into that trade for some reason. And I mean, we don't know what happens behind the scenes. Maybe he wanted to leave, maybe he didn't want to stay, but either way, it just seemed like he was kind of an unnecessary addition to it. And then we still didn't get a first round pick out of it, which I was just like, all right.
Right. And that's like you mentioned it before. That's what makes it hurt about all of this, especially just the way it all happened and came together so quickly. it's just like the way that they were actually starting to gel as a team down the stretch, and then man, it like all goes like dominoes, and they're all
Yeah. That
and
Gord
suddenly.
Blackwell Appleton line was absolutely killer, which is
Yeah.
why it sucks that they broke that up.
Oh yeah, and then all of a sudden, they're all gone, and now you're looking at almost a completely different team in a sense.
Right. Yeah, I mean, watching that game last night, I mean, like, if you stay up to date with it pretty good, nothing's too surprising. But I mean, if, for example, if I hadn't watched any of the last like 5 games or something, you're going to watch that team. There's going to be whatever 4 or 5 names on the ice that you've just never heard of before. And that's where it's just kind of going to be hard for fans to kind of stick around. Because, I mean, a lot of people bought Giordano jerseys. I don't know about Yarncroke, Johansson, the rest of those guys, but a lot of people bought Giordano jerseys. And, moving on from guys like that, I mean, him in particular, we knew it was kind of going to happen. But yeah, the team just looks different. Not necessarily in a worse way now. I mean, we looked great last night, but it's just a lot of new faces out there at one time.
Yeah. And that's something we'll have to get used to as this team becomes less new, I guess, and just some of the roster churn as an expansion franchise, and some of the names that come and go, but I think a thing that's good about this right before was the McCann extension, and Tristan and I talked about this in our last one, but I think that's good, and especially after this trade deadline, it's good to have him here for a long time, and because that'll be a face that people, like you said, can recognize, and will be able to be consistent, and will get you jersey sales, because he's a very good player, and they lock him up and keep him in here, and I think that's all around a great thing, even though they kind of do this sort of dismantling at the deadline.
Yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to see who else they, view as kind of those long-term pieces because, other than McCann, we haven't signed any extensions, right? And so McCann, when they signed his extension, they straight up said, this is a guy that we're gonna, build a bit of an offense around, and he's gonna be here for a while, and he's someone that we want for a long time. And I mean, there's guys like, Brandon Tanev's been injured all year, but he's on, I think, a 4-year deal or something like that. Yanni Gord, something the same. And so, they haven't extended them, so we don't know if they view those guys as the long-term pieces or not, but I would have to imagine so. And then on the back end, I don't know what their plan is there, because obviously that there's so much improvement that needs to happen. But I don't know. I think Adam Larson looks solid. Jamie Alexiak, you kind of want that big body, but other than that, like, I don't really know who else they see as sort of their long-term guys on the back end. And maybe there is no one, maybe they see
Right.
everybody as a tradable option. So we'll see what happens there. It's interesting though.
Yeah. Kind of following up on that, like, as far as some of the new faces that are here, was it Daniel Sprong? I know is one. Victor Rask is another.
Yeah.
What have you kind of seen from them? Just your thoughts on them so far.
Yeah. So Sprong I mean, he's played 3 games and I'm pretty sure he has 3 goals. I mean, the one last night was probably his luckiest, kind of just bounced in off another
Yeah,
dude.
right.
But still, the guy's playing with a ton of energy. And like I said, I didn't love the Marcus Johansson trade because he wasn't making a ton of money. We had him for pretty cheap. But they got him for a player and picks too. So in
Yeah, there was
hindsight,
some
that's
good
looking really
value there.
good
Yeah.
because Sprong's looking like, he's playing better than a fourth liner, which is what everyone kind of, or that's what he was in Washington, I guess. So that's what
Yeah.
his expectation really was, but he's playing out of his skin right now. And then as for Rask, I'm pretty sure he was mostly an AHL guy with the Wild. Like, I don't think he played a ton of minutes with the actual Wild. But he looked fine last night. He's probably still not going to be more than at best, like a third line guy for us, but he looks like I'm pretty sure he's someone that Ron Francis drafted like way back when. There's something like that. There's
Oh,
some
right,
sort of
yeah, in
connection with Ron
Philadelphia.
Francis. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, it's probably one of those things where he kind of the same thing like with Hayden Fleury, where he sort of just wants to like kind of follow up and see if what he saw way back then kind of progressed. But from what I saw, like, I don't know, last night he had a good little snipe to the back post. That was a nice goal. And then other than that, I mean, he skates well. He's not the most physical guy, but he's pretty quick and it looks like he's got a good shot. So I like to see that. Apart from him, Cole Lynn's been called up pretty much for the rest of the year from Charlotte. And, we've seen him in little spurts,
yep.
but I thought that right before the deadline, he got called up for like a game or two. And that's when I thought he was really starting to like really put it together. He was averaging like 3 shots on goal, which is something that's pretty hard to do if you're just like a fourth line guy that plays whatever 10, 12 minutes a night. But he was getting shots on goal and he was just looked dangerous. And then he got sent back down and then the whole trade deadline happened. And then now he's back up. So he's a guy that I'm trying to see score his first goal at some point soon. We'll see what happens there, but I like him as a prospect. We'll probably spend next year in Coachella Valley with the AHL team, but I think he's got a future with the team if he just, keeps going the way he's going right now.
Yeah, and speaking of Coachella Valley, I kind of want to know since this Kraken are obviously in the running for Shane Wright. I mean, looking at the standings right
Yeah.
now, we're 1 point above Montreal and 3 above Arizona, who are the only 2 teams below us in the standings. So, if we get Shane Wright, pair that with Matty Beniers, how do you think the farm system for the Kraken is shaping up?
For as limited as it is right now, it looks pretty good. I mean, you have Matty Beniers, what's his name, Riker Evans up
Yeah,
in
that's
somewhere in
that's a guy
Canada
that
right
I'm
now.
super high on is Evans. I love him.
Yeah. Yeah. I always love those offensive D men. I think like
Yeah,
he kind of reminds me of Vince Dunn in a way. And then Ryan Winterton, he's somewhere out there too. Um, I don't even know if he's WHL or AHL, but he looks good too. So those are just 3 guys right there that we're all super high on, especially Matty Beniers. Obviously, we know he's probably going to play by the end of this year with the Kraken, and that'll kind of give us a good glimpse on what's going to happen. I don't see him playing in Coachella at all next year. If we get Shane Wright, maybe he plays a couple games down there and then gets called up, but I think from what I've seen on tape, he could probably just play from the start. And then, it's going to come down to what else they do to build those forward lines, but the forwards at least I think are looking really good for the future.
and go back to Matty Beniers for a second because I hadn't
As
heard that actually. Do you think there is a chance that he could play with Seattle this year?
Yeah, so he's in the Frozen Four right now, which is basically the Final Four of
Right.
NCAA hockey, obviously. And I think once that's over, he will. I don't know how long it takes until that's all done, but the expectation, and I think Ron Francis has said the same thing, is even if it's just for a couple games, they're going to try to get him in camp and see if they can get him in maybe whatever 5-10 games at the end of the year if possible. And so I think that'll be a super exciting look at it because the team's actually playing with a lot of heart and grit right now, despite having really nothing to play for. And then I think that'll be kind of a nice environment for Matty Beniers to come into because you don't have any expectations really, right? At this point in the year, you're just trying to prove yourself for next year. So
Yeah.
if he can just come in and just play freely, I think even if it's for a couple games, that'll help him so much for next year.
Yeah, and that'll be cool too for the fans because it's been tough sledding like we've talked about with the trade deadline, and so I think if they can get him in there for like you said 5 or 10 games, like I think that would like really get everybody going and reinvigorate some of the interest in this team again.
I think a lot of people would buy that jersey too,
Oh
especially
yeah, for
considering
sure.
that he's one of those guys that will be around at least for a little while.
Yeah, I've said it before I've said it on Twitter too, but I kind of compare him at least offensively as like hockey's version of Julio Rodriguez, kind of, because I
Yeah,
see
I could see it.
some of the offensive upside and the player and personality. Like he's a generational, like, build your franchise around talent.
Right. Yeah, he's going crazy with Michigan pretty much. Like I don't even follow him on Twitter, like the Michigan hockey team, but their
Right.
notifications come up all the time and it's always like, oh, Matty Beniers with another assist, Matty Beniers with a goal. It seems like he's pretty much doing everything he can for that team. And then on top of that, he was playing in the World Juniors. I don't remember how long ago that was. Or no, it was in the Olympics. That's what
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, that's right.
And from what I saw in those games, he was damn near our best player. Like he was saucing everyone with the puck, and honestly, should have gone further than he did, but he didn't get a shot in a shootout, which I'm still pissed about. But
Yeah.
yeah, he looks like the real deal, even on the national team level. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, and even because I watched some of those Olympics highlights, and Beniers looked damn good, like really good. I'm super excited for him to come up and show us what he has for the Kraken. And if you pair it with a guy, even if we don't get Shane Wright, I don't know who any of the other top prospects are for this year's draft. So if we don't get Shane Wright to add to that, which would, by the way, just be absolutely insane, him and Beniers on a line would just kill everything. But what are some of the other prospects that you think Seattle could be looking at?
I'm honestly not sure. Like you, I haven't looked into it too much because I'll probably look into it more once we actually know like where we're picking. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Shane Wright looks great. We'll see. That Michigan always churns out a bunch of guys, so chances are it'll be someone from Michigan that we could take. And then other than that, I'm honestly not sure. I'll probably look into it more once I know where we're picking. But yeah,
All right, I think that's mostly all that I wanted to cover with the Kraken. So, why don't we go ahead and segue a little bit, because as we speak right now, at the time of this recording,
oh yeah,
Kansas
how
City
we doing?
Wolves are in Peoria against Logan Gilbert. So, uh,
Currently up one
I'm
nothing, but the M's have runners on first and second.
I'm kind of curious,
Oh,
Gabe.
Kelenick's on. How'd he get there? Oh, he's singled. Let's go. All right.
Yeah,
All's alive
I'm
and well.
curious. Couple weeks in, what are your first impressions of the spring training and some of the new guys like Winker and Eugenio?
I mean, Winker's had a slow start, to be honest, but he's not one of those guys I'm worried about just because he's had his
Yeah,
time in the league. And then Suarez is, you pretty much know what you're going to get from him. I have a friend here at school who's a huge Reds fan. I was actually with him when the trade went down, so he was pretty pissed off about that. But yeah, we were talking about him, and he was just saying like, yeah, obviously he's going to strike out a ton. He might not bat any better than Kyle Seager did. If it might be something around 210, 215, but he'll probably get you his 30 homers at least his 30 homers on the year. And so for that, I mean, you can't really ask for too much more. I mean, if he
yeah,
gets back to what he once was, then sure, you're looking at like whatever 45, close to 50 home runs. Winker, like I said,
I
I'm
have
not
a
worried
hard
about
time
him.
seeing that happen though.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And then other than that, like the scary thing for me, at least at this point, is just this is the first year with any real expectation. And so the hard part is just kind of like trying to put a damper on it because it's like, all I do is read these, predictions of what people think are going to happen. And some people have us at, 90 wins. And then some guys think we're not cracking 80. And a bunch of those guys that were playing out of their socks last year are going to regress. And both of those things I think could happen. It's just a matter of, who steps up and who falls off. If you get
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, to be honest, like, it's going to be some mix of that. Like,
right,
I think in some areas they will regress, and in some areas they will. I can see them maintaining some of the success from last year, like the bullpen, for example. There are some guys that I can see getting hit and like that were breakout stars last year, but I think mostly it's going to be still going to be a really good bullpen, a really deep bullpen. And yeah, I think I'm on the optimistic side, just because I like what they did in the offseason, and they really brought the floor of this team up. And
Right.
so that's why I'm kind of high on them this year. But yeah, I mean, you're right about the expectations. Like, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it really is like something to watch.
The funny thing is, you were talking about how they brought the floor up, and that's exactly the phrase that Jerry used when he signed or when he traded for Adam Frazier. He basically just said, the floor at this position is so much higher than it was last year. Basically, you had a bunch of guys playing second base last year,
Yeah,
and he's the
that's
guy
kind
that
of what I was
that
thinking
no
about.
one's talking about anymore. No one's talking about Adam Frazier right now because everyone's
Yeah.
excited about Suarez and Winker and how Julio's doing and stuff like that. And people don't realize that Adam Frazier's going crazy in spring training right now, just knocking singles through and whatever. Like, you know, and he's the guy that I'm honestly just as excited about as anyone because he was an all-star and he can bat 280 and he can lead off the lineup like he's shown in spring training, and that's such a valuable thing to have right now.
Yeah, and that's some of the thing that I've seen too is what people kind of don't realize is last year they didn't really have any hitters at all. Like maybe other than Kelnick in September and Mitch Haniger, like they
Yeah.
didn't have and Ty France. I don't give France enough credit. But other than
Keegan June
those
was
three,
great.
yeah. But other than those three guys, like you didn't have any on base, you didn't have any power, you didn't have any what was the other one? I forget, but
Yeah.
yeah, you just didn't have any of that. And now you've got France and Frazier who will get on base for you. You've got Winker and Suarez who will give you your power along with Haniger. Now the lineup is looking a lot deeper and a lot better. It went from a bad lineup to a good lineup in like that in one off season, which is a very good thing. And then you throw in potentially a healthy Kyle Lewis, and it goes from a good lineup to a great lineup. And now you're looking at like, okay, we can run down the Astros.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is like it's the same thing that a lot of people are saying, that the thing that's gonna really make or break. I mean, people can talk about the acquisitions and whatnot, but most of those guys, are MLB proven guys. Whereas, like, I think the real tipping point is going to be Jared Kelenic, Cal Raleigh, Julio when he comes up. Guys like that were, with Kelenic and Raleigh that were really kind of just getting their feet wet last year. And I still think Cal Raleigh can be a good catcher and a good hitter. He's got power for sure.
Oh yeah.
But it's just going to be a matter of whether he can do it consistently. Because like you just said, we didn't have that power consistently other than really Mitch Haniger last year. I mean, I'm pretty sure Kyle Seager set his career high in home runs, but it wasn't consistent. It was clutch, but it wasn't super consistent.
Right.
And so if you can get consistent power hitting, and then you have those guys like you said, Ty France, Adam Frazier, that'll just get on base, JP Crawford, hopefully, then we're in a great spot.
Yeah, I think when Julio comes up and if Kalu's healthy, I think our outfield could be one of the best in the majors. Because just even both offensively and defensively, you have guys like Haniger, like Winker. When Taylor Trammell, who is a great prospect, is like your sixth or seventh uh, best outfielder, then you're doing something right. And that's really just a testament to Jerry Dipoto for me for building a team that was getting old and just completely rebuilding it into what it is right now.
Yeah, and it's crazy because that outfield is so deep. Like there's so many ways you can configure that if you want to. You don't have to have Jesse Winker playing left field. You can have him DH and throw whatever Kellenic, someone else out there. Julio's been playing out there too. Toro, I think, played left field for an inning the other day. And so it's like there's so many different things that you can do with that outfield. And people don't want to give Mitch Haniger credit. No one talks about Mitch Haniger in media. No one talks about Mitch Haniger being one of the better, right fielders in baseball.
Yeah.
But I mean, Mitch Haniger has been so consistent for a Mariners team that has been so inconsistent for the last 5-10 years. And people don't want to give Mitch Haniger the credit for it, but the second you do and you start realizing that, he's probably a top 15, in my opinion, right fielder in baseball, then you're looking at Mitch Haniger, the number 3 prospect in baseball right now, according to MLB.
I'd argue number 1, but that's just me.
Right. Yeah. And then you have Jared Kellenic, who was, I think at his highest, maybe 3 or something like that. And, everyone knows what he can do if he really puts it all together. And then you have Jesse Winker, who's an all-star as well. So it's
I
crazy.
think that's where it really gets fun for Scott Service, is like you've got all these guys and rotating around, and that's why there's the DH. That's why there's an expanded or a universal DH. This is to give guys days off now and rotate and platoon, sort of like a little bit like the Rays have done and are doing. And to be honest, for me, I think they're going to exploit this a lot, but it sure seems like Winker and Luis Torrens are like a perfect platoon match.
Right.
As far as DH and left field respectively.
Yeah, that's funny because I never thought about it that way, but now that you like laid it out, I'm like, oh yeah, you're totally right. Just considering their splits.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, like, we haven't even talked about like our starting rotation, and I think that's going to be better than a lot of people think too. And that's like, I think Logan Gilbert can take a huge leap this year.
Oh, absolutely. I was watching him in his previous start. I know he's probably pitching right now, but
he's got 2 Ks in 2 innings. He's given up 2 hits and an earned run. Yeah.
One of those hits coming from one of the Julio
it's Bobby
Rodriguez
Witt.
prospects and Bobby Witt. So
yeah,
can't really fault him for one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching him in his last start, and already the difference between last year's slider and this year's slider. I mean, that slide, he had a couple punch outs on his off speed this in the last game, and it was like markedly better than almost any outing last year of his off speed. And that was my thing, is like, he needs to get his breaking pitches over for strikes and like actually be able to control them. And he's going to have a monster year, because we know the fastball is like truly special. It's like, it's
right.
90, 97, 98, but it's like unhittable 97, 98. And so like getting those off speed over, and that's what I saw against Oakland, and which was really, or I forget who it was that he started against, but that's what I saw again in his last spring training start, which was really like making me hopeful.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is,
on top of that, you have guys like Kirby and Brash, who against Oakland absolutely raked. Like they just piled up the Ks and the whole 9 yards. So
to be fair though, that's, again, we should take this all with a grain of salt, because it is spring training, but also that, we know Oakland's tearing it out or tearing it down and just blowing it all up. So
this is true.
I think, oh shoot. Yeah, I think for Kirby and Brash, one of them, I think Brash could potentially win the fifth rotation starter.
Yeah, I was gonna
really
ask Gabe,
exciting.
like, who do you think is that 5th starter? Is it gonna be Kirby, Brash, Sheffield? God help us.
No, I think it's gonna be Brash when it's all said and done, because Ryan, you and I talked about this on Twitter. It was frustrating for me, because if you come into the year or into the off season, I guess, saying, we're gonna try to trade for a fifth pitcher. Because you knew Yusei wasn't coming back, and you knew Tyler Anderson wasn't coming back.
Right.
And so you come into the offseason and you say, we're going to try to trade for that fifth pitcher. And then now we're at the point where they just haven't. And then I think it was John Morosi on Twitter was like, all right, the final spots between Brash and Sheffield to kind of fight it out. And it's like, so are we just done looking for that last pitcher? And that's kind of what it seems like.
Yeah.
That
And
said,
that's extremely
Jerry's
frustrating for me because, sorry,
right.
it's
Yeah,
extremely
Jerry's so
frustrating.
good at disguising things, I guess, that it wouldn't shock me at all if tomorrow we traded for a pitcher. So
Right.
we'll see.
Ray came out of nowhere. Winker and Suarez
Right.
came out of nowhere. So, I mean, who knows? He could be
Yeah.
working on something. All right. Well, for some reason, it has decided to kick me off or do the 10-minute warning thing. So it looks like we're going to have to call it wraps for today. But I think we had some.
Actually, real quick, can we talk
Yeah.
about the Seahawks real quick? Because
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We got 8 minutes. Let's do it.
let's talk about the tire fire that the Seahawks organization's in right now. So
All right. Go ahead.
first things first, there are some draft caps. I don't know if any of you have seen them. So I'm gonna
I
If you
think
can
you may
remind
have texted me about this.
yeah. So right here,
Oh,
draft.
yeah. No, I did see these.
yeah. So, and they've just steadily gotten worse. I
did
mean,
see.
I'm wearing the 2017, I think, draft cap right now. But 2020 I really liked. And then the last two have just I mean, it's not bad. It's not a bad hat. Don't get me wrong. But
I like the dark brim. I will say that. I like the
Yeah,
dark
me
blue
too.
brim.
yeah, but the white Seattle on the neon green Seahawks just does not work for me.
Yeah. Yeah, the neon green is blinding.
And then
That's ugly.
the only other real thing is I have been very, very vocal on this podcast about wanting to trade for Gardner Minshew. And granted,
Okay.
that is partially because I am a Gardner Minshew fan. I will not lie. But that's also because there's not really any other really great options out there. I mean, I think we all can agree that we do not want Baker Mayfield in a Hawks uniform. And then in the
Yeah.
draft, I was not that high on Malik Willis, who I think is the best quarterback available. But after looking at some of his tape and seeing like what his pro day was, I wouldn't be upset if we took Willis at 9, but at the same time, I think Minshew would be the better option because we kind of know what we're getting with Minshew, and he would be a very cheap stopgap. So I kind of want to know who you think, if we had to go for a pitcher or a quarterback, wrong sport, God. But if we had to go for a quarterback, who would you take?
I think, to be honest, right now, with the draft class that's up right now, I'm on the wagon of let's stick with Drew Lock. And
Yeah,
this
I
year
may.
is not. Yeah,
Sorry.
go for it.
I was gonna say that's what I've been seeing like going around is like, well, hang on, let's just see what Drew Lock can do.
And next year's
yeah.
draft class is loaded anyways. So worst
Exactly.
case scenario, you go and get a quarterback then.
And that's kind of where my head's at, because with Drew Lock, it's like, we have his college tape and we have his Denver Broncos tape, and his college tape's great and his Denver Bronco tape sucks. So then at the same time, it's like, if you can get the Mizzou Drew Lock in Seattle, then you don't even really need to go for a quarterback this year or next year. But worst case scenario, he's not good for us this year, and then you have that loaded class next year, and we have a first round pick again in that draft. So it's just like, we'll be able to get something out of that. And that's kind of what I think the plan is. I'd be shocked if we went quarterback in this draft, but we might go for like a late round one or something like that. We've done that in the past. But I think the plan right now, if I had to guess, is ride Drew Lock for this year, Gino will back him up or something like that, or they'll duel it out if Gino figures out his legal issues. And then you look forward to 2023 and you use one of those first round picks on a quarterback. I think that's what they're looking at.
Right. But something I wonder about that plan that they've got going right now is you just traded your franchise, like you just commit to this thing. You just traded your franchise QB. Do you really trust that Pete Carroll, who is now 70 years old, and John Schneider, who has not had great draft picks, to be able to kind of pull back or pull out that college Drew Lock? Do we trust their ability to bring it back out? Like that's a big question for me.
Yeah. And the good thing for Drew Lock, I guess, in his case, and the thing he has going for him is obviously he can't complain about his receivers. And I think, it's still, we'll see what's going to happen with the O-line because, that obviously needs work every single year. But I feel like if they gave him, a better O-line than they ever gave Russell, and then you throw in DK and Tyler Lockett, then, he's in a position to succeed, and then it's kind of up to him. That's the way I see it. But then at the same time, I get what you're saying in that I'm like, it sounds sour to say this, but I'm not a Pete Carroll fan these days. I don't know. I think his time's kind of passed. I think the Russell Wilson era was that time. So
I agree.
I was hoping they would go in a
I know
different
you agree.
direction with that. But yeah, I think mostly it's going to come down to the quarterback themselves if they can figure it out, as long as the weapons and the protection's there.
All right. Well, Gabe, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. It was very good talking with you, and
Yeah, let's
I
do it
think we're
again sometime.
just about out of time. So once again, you've been listening to Seattle Sports Secrets. I'm Ryan Hanna, and with Gabe Dang, you can find him on Twitter at csports99. Gabe, appreciate it. Thanks
Yep.
for coming on. We'll see you
Thanks, guys.
around.
Take care, y'all.